Hi, I'm David Sable, your instructor for spirituality in work or spirituality in the workplace. This video is about a contemplative reading practice, and it will enable you to get more out of the readings, but it may take you more time than you used to go through contemplative reading. And I'm going to go through it, but I understand that you're not going to be able to apply this for every assignment for all the readings. I'm instead going to expect that you'll pick one of the readings and just take maybe one page or even a part of a page and go through the contemplative reading exercise with it. And that will give you a way to understand how you are really integrating the content with your own experience. And that's really the objective here. I want to give you just a little bit of background. Most of us have gone through a school system that has taught us what we know by listening to authority and getting the right answers, or reading a textbook to get the right answers. And here in university, this is a little different. What we're encouraging you to do, what we're cultivating here, is your ability to think for yourself, to actually get at what matters to you and to integrate that with the content in the readings or in the slides. To do that means that you really do need to explore what you sense, what you conclude through analysis, and something about a deeper or intuitive sense, felt sense. And I'll talk a little bit about that here, and also in the other video on instructions for weekly assignments. So the way to begin is the way you would usually do things. You might begin by reading an excerpt, and here you see in the exercise, I've selected 2 paragraphs from Module 2 in Spirituality and Work. And what we're going to do with that is we're going to use that as an example. And so what you would do would be to read these paragraphs maybe 2 or 3 times, and then begin to identify first what words or expressions you're not really sure of. So in the first paragraph, you might see in the middle of the paragraph, there's an expression called dynamic processes. What does that mean? And you would just underline that or circle it, just to signal to yourself, you're not exactly sure what that means. And you would do that, and as I'm saying, you only have to do that for a couple of paragraphs that you felt were maybe kind of dense or profound, but a little unclear, and you weren't sure what they meant. To understand what the author meant, you might then check dictionary definitions of what those terms mean. And you may go to other parts of the document where that's mentioned again. But basically, this is kind of a superficial way to understand what this document actually means to you. It might give you something about what the author intended, but it won't necessarily relate to your own experience, nor will it engage you in a way to make up what becomes most meaningful to you. So what happens at that point is you need to be able to ask yourself, what assumptions are you bringing to this? What bias might you have? Are you able to keep an open mind? Are you able to consider multiple points of view? And do you differ from the author's point of view? And this may not be obvious, which is why we're going to break this down even further. Those kinds of questions come up all the time, especially as you take courses 3,000 level and above. And those kinds of questions are important for you to be able to answer. This is no longer just trying to figure out what's right according to authority. So we refer here to the contemplation practices that go with the weekly exercises. And here I'm borrowing from that and using it in the contemplative reading practice. So you'd be doing this separately from the weekly assignment. And it begins with just calming the mind to begin with by not reading, but just sitting back and letting yourself bring your attention to your breathing. And when you do that, you take a good posture, you pay attention to everything that's going on in the present, which includes the silence, and maybe you take a few deep breaths. And then you come to the exhalation, and your awareness is with it, and your inhalation comes, and you simply feel more present in your body. And whether you were doing this in a weekly assignment or whether you were doing it as a close reading or contemplative reading practice, it would be the same. This part, there's no particular object other than the breathing. And you're not trying to cut your thoughts off. They're part of what comes up. And you're just returning to being fully present, even if thinking comes up. And letting yourself do this for a few moments, it's like you could say, letting yourself take a break. And I'll give you a great example. I have a relative who just texted me this morning. And she was out on a sailboat. And they're coming up from the United States to Nova Scotia, she and her husband. And they're late. They were expecting to get in maybe yesterday, and she wrote and said, "We are becalmed," which means that there's no wind. And when you're in a sailboat with no wind, what happens? Everything gets very quiet. And you might notice the boat rocking a little bit. And you might notice the waves just lapping a little bit, or it might be completely still. But it's very different than the sensation of moving forward, getting a few hundred yards further along, and that sensation of motion. And so here, when you are doing mindfulness meditation for a few moments, and just letting the breath be as it is, it's like being in a sailboat and letting the wind out of the sails. And that gives you a sense of the whole space you're in. So I won't say too much more about that right now. And it's the way to begin for a few moments. And then you can turn your attention to the text that you're going to read, a couple of paragraphs that you've picked out. And now, instead of focusing on your breath, you focus on these paragraphs. And you read through it again, having already looked at the meaning of the words that the author used, and understanding as best you can what the author meant. Now you're reading it over to get a sense of its meaning for yourself. And as you're doing this, you're going to pay attention not only to the concepts, but to any underlying feeling that this brings up in you. And it may be directly related to what you are thinking, or it may seem sort of more generally related. Maybe it has to do with your feeling that you don't understand this fully. Maybe it's really related to the words themselves, and you're a little uncertain. Or maybe you're quite confident that you know exactly what this means, and you object, and you think that this is wrong. There's going to be a kind of feeling under that. And it's not the storyline, it's more like that feeling of what's behind the storyline or under the storyline. As if you were in a sailboat and something was pushing you along, even though there wasn't any wind, as if you had a motor going. And now you're going to pay attention there, which could be in here, or it could be in your throat, or it could be in your heart, or it could be in your stomach. It can actually be a physical sensation. And when you pay attention to that, you're getting closer to what this reading means to you. This does not mean to ignore the concepts. It does not mean that you're giving up the words. It means that you're understanding what's behind the words for you and how the words are affecting you. Some people say this is knowing from the heart. Some people say this is beginning to open up to your intuition. Well, here we're just going to say this is the felt sense, and it's not yet articulated. This is not something you yet even have words for, because it's subtle. And as soon as you can label it, then there's a storyline. And so what we're getting at is right there in the present moment, before you have the storyline to what these words mean. And what connects it with mindfulness is that that's what's going on for you in the present moment, and you're open to it without getting caught up in the judgment and the storylines. So what changes, what stays with you after you have experienced and explored your view in this more profound way? What stays with you may be very much connected with your own values, at least for the present moment. And that is what we're getting at. That is what is going to inform you about what else to say in the weekly assignment. So you could do a great job with the weekly assignment, you could understand the meaning as the author meant it, and then say, but I don't know what to say for myself. How do I regard this reading? What do I make out of this reading? And you might analyze it with reasoning and saying, well, another author said this, and Peter Senge said that, and Professor Sable, maybe he said this. But then what do you actually get from this reading? And by taking this underlying felt sense, you begin to have your own voice, your own meaning to what you were just reading. Okay, so that is one take through contemplative reading practice. And you'll find that there is a written document on the website, and it will give you further instruction, a little more detail, and enable you to prepare yourself to do some contemplative reading practice. Now, I suggest here that the example is taken from Module 2 in Spirituality and Work, but it could be any of the readings. I suggest you take either the first or second or third reading in the course and work with that in particular, and then try it again if you find it's useful. One more thing I need to say. If you do this, one of the things that's going to occur to you is, I don't have time to do this. This takes extra time. I have to get on with my other courses. I've got work to do. And maybe I have work even beyond these courses that I have to do. So I need to get to this faster. And I'm saying to you that I'm not suggesting you do this for every reading, but when you do try it for those readings, I think you'll find that it makes a difference. And so pick, maybe just one reading every once in a while and try this practice. It will relate to what we mean by getting at what spirituality means for you. It will relate to what we talk about feeling connected to the text, feeling connected to the course, feeling connected to each other in the discussion group, and feeling connected to what I'm trying to convey, feeling connected to me as the instructor. So please feel free to get in touch. You have my email address on the syllabus. You have my email address on every one of the PowerPoints, the opening slide. So with that, thank you very much for your attention here, and please stay in touch with us during the course. We'll try to get feedback to you as soon as we can for each assignment. Thank you.